Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Allison Schaff with Smashfly. We're so glad you could join us for an exciting conversation on sourcing and marketing and how the two can go hand in hand to drive better sourcing results. Before we get started today, I just wanted to bring a few announcements and housekeeping items. First, today's session will be recorded, and a link to the recording and slides will be sent to you following the webinar. Secondly, if you experience any technical difficulties today, please call ReadyTalk support at 800-843-9166. Don't worry about writing that down now. I'm going to type this number into the chat window for your reference later if you need it. After the presentation, our speakers are excited to answer your most burning sourcing questions. Feel free to submit them throughout the webinar using the chat box. We'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. Also, don't forget to say hi on Twitter. We'll be live tweeting throughout the presentation, and we would love to hear from you. So join the conversation with #sourcing, and feel free to tweet at Smashfly or at speaker C. Brablc. Finally, I'm very excited to welcome our two speakers today. First, we have Justen Baxter, Senior Strategic Sourcing Advisor at CSRA Inc., where he provides sourcing best practices and education. He's currently working on developing an enterprise-wide strategic sourcing center of excellence, building CSRA's talent communities, and fostering awareness of its employer brand. With over 11 years of experience in the recruiting field, Justen is passionate about testing and evangelizing cutting-edge sourcing technologies, particularly those that support defense industry recruiting efforts. We also have Chris Brablc joining us today. He's the Director of Product Marketing here at Smashfly, where he leads efforts from product messaging to thought leadership. With expertise in the areas of digital marketing, social media, and content marketing campaigns, he brings a unique and seasoned perspective to recruitment marketing best practices. So now, without further ado, Chris, take it away.
Well, thank you, Allie, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation and having Justen and being able to tap into Justen's expertise. Justen, how are you doing today?
Sorry, I'm great. I'm really excited to be here, and I think it's going to be a great and very rewarding experience for many on the call.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fantastic discussion, and it really comes at a really good time. I know SourceCon was last week, and so we have a number of people that are going to be on the call today from that conference as well. And I think just in general, what we're seeing an evolution in terms of how not only the recruiter role is evolving with all the things that are happening in our space with technology, with digitization, with consumerization, but we're seeing the sourcing profession really kind of evolve as well. And so when we think about all the things that we traditionally think was sourcing in terms of finding the right candidates, in terms of being able to find digital footprints, find people via Boolean string searches. One of the things that's interesting is that data has really become democratized. Finding people is becoming a little bit easier, especially with some of the technology that's out there. But it's really that the relationships that you can build after you find those candidates are really becoming the currency that help you be successful. So, Justen, when you think about sourcing, you've been doing this for a number of years now and have a lot of experience there. How has your role evolved and the way that you view sourcing evolved over the past several years?
So, it's evolved quite a bit. I think sourcers are seen more as technologists. I think automation and AI is really going to be the kind of next wave or evolution, like you said. The ability to look at kind of the latest and greatest tools and technologies, CRMs, things of that nature. It's evolving so quickly, especially AI, where the sourcer is not just punching in Boolean search strings, but they're developing targeted messaging strategy. I know in my industry where we look for unique security cleared software engineers, for example, or other types of skill sets that have very niche skills and security clearances, you must have a very captivating message. You cannot send a blanket email or a phone call. You need to humanize yourself in the messaging. So, unfortunately, I've seen where it's in some ways easier, but in other ways the market dictates that it's extremely difficult to find some of these candidates, and you need to leverage technologies like CRMs and like AI to stay ahead of the fray. I think that the sourcer of the future will be more of a technologist than just a classic recruiter smiling and dialing. They'll be using a lot of automated features and tools to help really automate and just expedite the recruiting process. And that's kind of where I see the next wave. When I say AI, I mean artificial intelligence. Yeah.
And when you kind of unpack that as well, when you talk about those skills, I think there's the human skills and the technology skills that you mentioned. And so we're here in 2017, and so much has changed just even in the past year to 2 years. But when you think about kind of the end of this decade, what are the things that you see kind of the best sourcing professionals being tasked with? What are the things that you think will really kind of allow the really good sourcers to kind of rise to the top in terms of the skills that they have and from just both a human perspective as well as a technology perspective?
Yeah, I think above all, the human factor is never going to be removed. I mean, I've seen debates where there's all this new technology out there with AI and automation, and sourcers are kind of worried that maybe they're going to be displaced by some of the technology. But I actually think there will be even a greater need for sourcers and their expertise. I think understanding of what tools work and what don't for your organization and aligning those to the business goals. So really, I think sourcers will be lockstep with their C-suite and looking at tools and guiding technological advances within talent acquisition. When I say human factor, at some point, even if you're doing drip campaigns and targeted messaging, somebody needs to still pick up the phone and call the candidate. They still need to maybe host an event. There's always going to be that human element. So you can have marketing savvy and you can have the right tools, but the human aspect of sourcing at its core will not be removed. I think we're just evolving where we're going to be more technologically savvy. We're going to have to look for, the newest, most robust CRMs out there. I think that's kind of a cornerstone for sourcing, is having a very robust CRM. But also there's other tools out there, Chrome extensions, for example, and new things always popping up. AI is going to be the next wave. Understanding those tools, being able to get up to speed quickly, and then presenting that, and then training your staff, managers, recruiters, et cetera. So I see it, as not only a sourcer going to be technologically advanced, they're going to need to have understanding of recruitment marketing, understanding of the business, and certainly a broader understanding of the enterprise as a whole, so they can align the CRM and other tools with the business line needs. The IT job market, at least in the DC metro area, is extremely competitive. It's even more competitive within the defense industry and the security cleared space. You must have a captivating message. You must set yourself apart through drip campaigns, through captivating messaging. So I think it's really, you need to have all three of these specialties to set yourself apart and really brand your organization. Recruitment it's not just a one-size-fits-all solution, to be honest with you. And you can have a great CRM, but you need to have good people using the tools who know how to use the tool as well.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think, whenever we talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, technology, and how it fits into those roles is that, it's about efficiency. It's about doing things smarter, and being able to leverage, automation, technology, artificial intelligence to help to do things that would take you hours to do, and do them much more quickly, in minutes, in some cases. And so, but always there is the need for domain expertise. There's a need to really understand your market, the audience you're going to, understand the business, and understand the value as your employer. And I think those are all fantastic points. So when you think about all of that domain expertise that you have, and you think about when you're going about or tasked with the business to be able to go find certain individuals, as you said, it's incredibly competitive. When you think about campaigns and running those campaigns and leveraging kind of recruitment marketing best practices there, what are the things that you think about, and what are the fundamentals of those campaigns when you're really thinking about conducting outreach, finding those people, and ultimately getting them to appeal to your brand?
Yeah, so I think it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. I think you're looking at your specific vertical, because one line of business can be very different from another line of business, even within the same corporation. So you're really looking at it holistically. First, you want a brand, you want to have a call to action, and you want to have compelling messaging. You don't want to look like you're spamming them, and you don't want to inundate either. You don't want to opt out. So I think sometimes it's good to do some test campaigns to see is this segment of the population responding. How I might recruit Java developers may be very different than how I recruit a segment that cybersecurity engineers or .NET or program managers. So it really understanding the business and understanding what messaging works, and then tracking that ROI. So understanding how many applies, how many views, how many clicks did I get. So having a robust CRM that's able to do that, that's fairly intuitive, I think is very essential. And you want the messaging to be compelling. If you can embed a video or a graphic that's very specific to that segment, an example being if I'm going after recruiting for diversity hires, maybe women in cybersecurity, and I want to reach out to them, I may want to have a compelling graphic with maybe a bio of one of our female engineers in cyber, and have her tell a story there. So I think having a targeted message that makes sense, that's going out to the right population, that sets yourself apart, and I think having it be appealing, aesthetically appealing, and short and sweet. You don't want to get to a point where your opt-out rates are very high, and then you're losing folks. But you also don't want to just be sending messaging where there's no call to action. So there's kind of a right balance, and sometimes it takes some tries to understand the segment of the population you're going after. Do you want a call to action in that first email? Probably not. Maybe the second or third, you may want to embed some links to jobs. But maybe the first message is really just a tickler. You're just letting them know what your company's doing. Maybe you've had a major contract award for my industry, or maybe you've had a major acquisition or things of that nature, and just bring their attention to some of that as a branding effort first, or providing information, just general information on the industry. Maybe in that second messaging, there's a call to action to join the talent community, and then maybe the third message, you're asking them to actually apply, or you're picking up the phone and calling them. It's really finding that right balance. I know software engineers are leaving sites such as LinkedIn in droves. So, we're at a point where you really need to have targeted messaging. You need to set yourself apart, because in many cases they're not responding to a lot of those in-mails on LinkedIn, for example, and you need to be able to have really targeted messaging and not turn people off. I mean, I think that's kind of the first goal. And the second is an appropriate call to action. If that's joining the talent community or if that's applying for a job or both. And I know for the millennial population like myself, I don't spend more than 3 or 4 seconds on a lot of emails. So if you don't have a compelling graphic or even video that you can put out there, it may end up in the trash folder. So, you do want to set yourself apart. In my industry, these candidates are getting hundreds of emails from other competitor companies, government agencies. So I'm competing with everyone under the sun. So you have to have a very compelling reason for them to stay, look at your email, and then even take it a step further, but send you a resume or click a link. And I think that's where having a robust CRM, is so critical to a Fortune 500 being able to be competitive. I mean, without one, I wouldn't know how you do it, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I think are some important points there. I think in general, when you're understanding who you need to recruit and who the business needs to succeed, it's all about understanding, all right, who are those people, and then I think as you talked about, and I know you've done a lot of work here, is just identifying where that audience lives. I know you mentioned LinkedIn and how a lot of times a lot of technical talent isn't on LinkedIn anymore, or at least not in tune with that, because they get LinkedIn emails every day, all day, from everybody. And so, being able to reach those on that channel is really difficult. So, I know, and maybe you could share, kind of briefly, how you do this. But I know you attend a lot of different events. You try to find, especially for specific audiences, you find them in a lot of different meetups and other things around that, and then you ultimately take them, all those relationships you build at those, and bring them into kind of the talent network that is like a combination of all your sourcing campaigns, as well as all these kind of in-person meetings that you have with candidates.
Yeah, and I think, as I said before, I think having a holistic solution, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all solution, because you may find your best candidates from cold calling, finding resumes at events and cold calling them, but then somebody needs to maintain keeping those candidates warm that maybe aren't getting interviewed. That's where you do drip campaigns. You may get your best candidates from specific, targeted job fairs. Well, you need to capture that data and segment it out into folders and subfolders so you can aggregate it, within the CRM, so that you can keep, track those candidates, know which ones are moving, maybe cross-reference them on LinkedIn to know where they are. So I think, it's really looking at what has worked, what hasn't worked, and diving into that data, within the CRM to understand, here's our current state, what's our future state need to be, and then aligning that with kind of your sourcing, recruitment, overall strategy. I find that I use every source possible, because if I'm going after security cleared Java developers or something extremely niche, it may be an event, and maybe I'm going out to coffee with somebody. It could be a job fair, job board, LinkedIn. I mean, I'm using Twitter, any means necessary to try to find contact information, data, and resumes, and feeding that into the system. And then you can dive into the weeds and aggregate that data later. But again, you just want to get that in, and then dive into the details so you can develop your messaging strategy.
Yeah, and I think that gets into some of the areas is different audiences will require a different kind of mix of recruitment marketing channels, resources. As you said, some might be a lot more high touch, some might come from events, some might come through advertising channels. In any case, if you have a way to capture that talent in some place and then be able to segment that audience and then deliver them, a lot more personalized email messages, potentially SMS, depending on the industry you're in, there might be some different ways that you can get their attention. And I know we've seen organizations like Thomson Reuters really start that. And so when we think about personalized messaging, it doesn't have to be groundbreaking. What it needs to do is that you understand that the audiences are a little bit different. In this case, they have some, different copy around recent grads versus technology professionals. You might have, 3 or 4 different candidate audiences that require a little bit of different value in terms of what you as an employer provide to value of those types of candidates. And so what we're saying here is you probably start with, a brand value that you communicate to all audiences. And then as you get better and better with personalization in your targeted messaging, you start to test out different messages with core groups and core audiences that you have. And so that might be sending an email campaign and seeing how that resonates. And so, Justen, when you look at those campaigns and start to send those targeted messaging, what do you look for in terms of being able to understand, hey, does this message work with this audience? Or how do you test and optimize those messages?
Yeah, I think you have to look at what was the call to action. Was it to join a talent community? Was it to apply to a job? Was it just a message to, brand the company or the business, line of business, or the technology or acquisition? So you have to look at, what's the mission, what's my end goal? Because if my message is just to apply to the job, then obviously I'm looking at apply, view, click rates, and obviously, opt-out rates. You want low opt-out rates. If I'm looking at a call to action for them to join a talent community, then, it's how many people have I driven to that talent community? How strong are some of those people that have joined? Do they align? If I'm reaching out to DevOps, engineers, are they really DevOps? Are they software engineers that want to grow up and be a DevOps engineer? You want to make sure that you're bringing in the right people into your talent community too. So that's also important. So there's several layers to that, Chris. I would say if it's a message where you're just doing a general branding, you want to have low opt-out rates. You just want them to be viewing it. If it's a call to action to apply, then obviously you want to see the candidates coming in. You want to know that you're getting interviews from those candidates and ultimately hires. And then if it's talent community, you're looking at low opt-out and how many people are we driving to those talent communities? How robust are those communities, and how much do they align with the segment of population? You know, if I'm reaching out to a population of folks, you want to make sure that they align well with who you're trying to reach. I want to make sure I'm reaching senior cyber engineers, and maybe I'm getting new college grads. Well, that's not the right segment that I want to bring in. They may work for other roles, but if I'm doing targeted messaging, I want to make sure that I'm reaching a senior cyber engineer as opposed to a new college grad majoring in cyber. So it's things like that. So I think it's kind of a convoluted answer, but I think there's several layers to that, and the data obviously that you're getting out of the CRM is helping you understand your messaging, helping you drill down with that data so that you're achieving hopefully the business goals of your C-suite, of your executives. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those are all the points. I think the one fallacy that most people have around emailing their database is that hey, we don't want any unsubscribes, and we shouldn't send an email because we might get people to unsubscribe from our database. What I will tell you is that you're not going to get any opens, you're not going to get any engagement, you're not going to get any conversions in terms of applicants or potentially hires from those campaigns if you're not sending anything to your database. And the only thing worse than, potentially, in the worst case scenario, getting your whole database to opt out is that you just have a database that keeps on getting built up, but has no engagement. It hasn't had engagement for months. And then you want to reach out when you have a job, and they don't have a relationship with you. They don't know your brand. And so when we think about that, it's really about, hey, you need to test things out. When you do get, high on subscribe rates, well, hey, that tells you one good thing, that you probably shouldn't send emails with that messaging again to that type of audience. But then you're going to get a lot of positive facts and figures around open rates, around engagement, that will give you a lot of positive indicators on messages that work for that audience that you should continue to do. So I think it's just, about testing. It's about making sure that you have measurement and that you're, making sure that understand what your goal is for those campaigns. And I think, the things that you're doing in terms of targeting different audiences, trying different messaging, and also trying messaging that isn't necessarily about a job, but is about, the brand, about, just starting the relationship with somebody. I think that's really, really interesting and important. And so when we think about kind of all that testing and messaging, I think the other aspect is, what you mentioned with talent communities, but we also call them talent networks. But, basically it's a database, and a database that can start to be segmented in a way that allows us to do this targeted messaging. And we went over before having talent networks that were contacts that have opted in a number of different ways. It might be, cold calling, and then once we get responses, bringing them into the talent network. It might be events that we go to that, people interacted with us and we bring them in. It might be going into LinkedIn, or even better, having somebody come to our career site and filling out an opt-in talent network form that they're giving you permission to potentially reach out to them. And so when you think about building your talent network and how you ultimately go about it, what are the things that you've seen that have worked, and then what is the value of the back-end system of having talent networks and talent pipelines that you can tap into?
So I think that's a good question. I think you're only as good as your data. If you have all these folks in a talent community sitting in your CRM, but you're not able to aggregate them into folders and subfolders and based on geography or skill set competency, then you're only as good as that information. So you could have 100,000 resumes. I mean, there's a common saying in recruiting: garbage in, garbage out. You want to make sure that you're able to segment those populations from those events. If it's a meetup, if it's something else where it's a targeted job fair, a virtual fair, anything like that. When you capture that data, somebody needs to go behind the scenes, and it's normally sourcing, where we go into that CRM and then we drill down into, what is this person's real experience? What are they looking for? Are they only interested in jobs in Virginia, DC, and Maryland, or will they consider going to Georgia? Are they a Java developer? Are they .NET? Things like that, so you can aggregate that, put it into folders and even subfolders, so that when you're able to do the targeted messaging and have them actually apply, to another talent network or to a job, you're not just sending out a mass blast. You're doing it to a segmented population where it's going to resonate, and hopefully there'll be a call to action, and they'll take it upon themselves to apply.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And when we think about that, I think there's a lot of examples of organizations doing that really interestingly. And I know from a marketing standpoint, anybody that comes to our website, we're going to have a number of call to actions to be able to opt in to a future communication with us, whether that's this webinar that we're on today, and anybody that can sign up to get more education, or it could be a white paper, or hey, just contact us, sign up for a demo of our technology platform. We are always looking for ways to be able to capture talent, and we're seeing organizations start to do that a lot more, whether it's GE with some of the things they're doing on their career side and through some of their campaigns. It might be on social. It might be in the apply flow for a job. There are a number of ways that we're seeing organizations do that, and I think the other thing that we're seeing is that organizations increasingly, especially with all the things that are happening with LinkedIn getting bought by Microsoft, and other communities that are kind of more third parties that recruiters have relied on and tapped into. They've realized that they want to create their own database, that they want to start building relationships not on third-party platforms, but be able to potentially find them on third parties, but bring them into their own databases where they can continue engagement. And so, when you're looking at kind of your strategy around, how to leverage other channels, but also, keeping some of that in-house, is that something that, you're seeing more and more happen more and more often?
Definitely. Just, being able to own, kind of the control of your own targeted marketing and bringing that more in-house, not taking away from what, third-party marketing organizations, agencies are able to bring to the table, but maybe taking a blended approach and just owning a little bit more of that in-house. And sometimes it can be cost prohibitive as well, only relying on the third parties. So again, I am seeing that more and more where, if you have a robust enough CRM, some of that can be displaced. And also I think it gives recruitment marketing, sourcing, talent acquisition, whatever you want to call it, whoever's using the tool, probably all three, ownership and control of that messaging. And I think I've seen that a lot more coming in-house, especially with, Fortune 200s. I'm seeing, Fortune 500s go that route. And it allows you to really own it, make sure that, you're doing what makes sense for your organization, because, only you're going to know what your organization wants to brand. And, if there's a change in leadership, the branding may change, or if there's an acquisition, merger, what have you. And you're able to be very agile, which I think is critical right now in recruitment marketing and certainly in sourcing. So I think those go hand in hand.
Yeah, and so when we think about that, and one of the questions I probably get all the time is, all right, I've created this database, I've segmented it, and then, now we have to start creating messaging. And you're telling me I need to use content, and probably not content that's job content, but, branded content. And I can tell you, like, we did actually research with our recruit marketing report card, which you can download at smashfly.com if you go to the resources section. But what we saw was that out of Fortune 500 organizations, only 1% sent emails, SMS messages that had content other than jobs. So the rest was just job alerts. But what we know is that most candidates aren't ready to apply today, especially ones that we're sourcing and potentially, have a good job right now, and may not be ready to move on. And so when you think about the content that you use to send, messages and go there and start to build rapport with candidates, what has been successful for you, and has that content allowed you to create better relationships and also, hopefully in this case, hire a little bit faster or find candidates a little bit faster?
Yeah, I think humanizing. I think personalizing. I may do a small video with, a really cool graphic, especially if I'm going after a millennial population that doesn't spend a lot of time on an email or in SMS, but more email, where I'd embed a really cool video. And then, just a message about my own experience. Maybe I attended a really cool event like Black Hat, for example, where I've gone. I may message, something about my own experience. Here's a link to something that I saw that was really cool. I really enjoy working in my organization. We work with the latest and greatest technologies. Keeping it short and sweet and making it more of a tickler than, hey, I'm just a recruiter and I want you to apply. And I think, humanizing and telling a personal story, if you can do that in a targeted message, gets far better response rates, builds that relationship, and really sets you apart. Again, the end goal is not to get opted out and get a response or a call to action. and have it be captivating enough where, either it's a little, funny tagline, or it's a personalized story, or both. So you're setting yourself apart from the hundreds of other recruiters at, every other industry that are going after the same segments of the population. That's where I think, a robust CRM that allows you to have a compelling message that's also aesthetically pleasing. I think especially, as you see the workforce aging and more millennials, especially in IT, coming into the ranks, you need to have extremely compelling video too. I think graphics don't get it done. I think embedding a video and a personalized message, and maybe even a link to your bio or another engineer at your company, that's going to be captivating and it's going to set you apart. You can't just have a bland email with text and a link to a job. You need to have much more than that, especially if you're trying to have them stay in your talent community or talent network.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think there's some been some questions too around more traditional kind of like recruit marketing campaigns and then personalized emails that are a little bit more individualized. And I think just in general, I think what you're talking about is templates that can be leveraged to go after specific audiences. So, again, if we're going after female engineers, that might be a story around, an engineer at your organization that has really excelled at the organization, but you personalize that message to that person in some of your sourcing campaigns. But when we think about it too, we're seeing organizations also leverage more personalized kind of mass campaigns to their audiences that are in their talent networks. And so, with that, I know we've seen a bunch of success with organizations that are doing simple things like newsletters that are happening on a monthly basis that they're getting really good results with. And you might ask where this content comes from. Well, it comes from the marketing team in most cases. It's all stuff that has been either featured, shared, and leveraged so that they're just taking and repurposing what already exists. We're also seeing, this is an example of Marriott, but we also have, examples from Nestle Purina, which I know we just came out with a case study with. But, they just sent their first newsletter to over 500,000 people, but it resulted in 4 hires and had click-through rates and open rates that were higher than industry average, according to MailChimp. So it's really, interesting around the type of content that can just, I think there's a combination of kind of more personalized sourcing messaging that is probably a little bit more individualized, and larger, more marketing type messaging that can keep candidates warm over time, that just keep them aware, hey, Nestle Purina exists. We're this great organization that provides this value. Thanks for being part of our talent network. And have that continually go in the inbox so that when a recruiter or sourcer reaches out to them, hey, they're up to date. They know that's happening, and they know that you're an organization they might want to work for. So when we think
Chris,
about kind of all go ahead.
No, I was just, so I was just going to say, especially with the millennial population, when you're doing those newsletters, think of the overall mission of your organization, because, I've seen a lot of stats, especially with the millennial population, where we want a mission that aligns, with our goals. So it's much more about company culture and overall mission than just the job and salary. It's very different than the baby boomer generation. And I think when you're thinking about individualized messaging or the newsletters, and we're going after that segment of the population, which is going to be the next wave of employees for us in Fortune 500s or wherever, I think you really want to think, what is the mission? What is the end goal? For what I do, it's national security in a lot of cases, or if I'm supporting a client, at a federal agency, it could be saving lives. What is the culture of your organization? And that, I think, sets you apart for that segment. more so than just we have really cool jobs and this is who we are. You have to look at the greater good, because that's a lot of what we're looking for. As a generation, I feel like I'm speaking for all millennials, but I just wanted to keep that in mind when we're doing these messages out to folks, targeted or mass.
Yeah.
I think that's vital.
And I think that's so on point. And I know we talk to a lot of organizations about purpose and connecting your purpose with the candidate's purpose. And we're seeing organizations talk a lot to their employees, especially when they're creating some of this messaging and they're creating their brands, of going, all right, well, you're obviously an engineer at our organization, and you've picked our organization and like working at our organization for a reason. What is the reason? And sometimes that could be, hey, the overarching goal of the mission of the organization. Sometimes that could be, hey, I like to work from home and it allows me more time with my family, allows me more flexibility in doing that. Hey, I have really exciting opportunities to travel and work abroad. There might be a number of different things that your organization or those types of candidate audiences value. And we're seeing organizations really start to communicate those a lot more targeted and a lot more personalized to those different groups. So I think just in general, the last thing, and I know you mentioned kind of CRM, as a technology that organizations should really look at. I think there's other technologies, and I'd be remiss to say like recruitment marketing platforms that include CRM, but also are tying that CRM into the other efforts you're doing, whether that's your career site, whether that's events, your job marketing efforts to any job board, and really kind of bringing those contacts in. But we talked about AI kind of to start the conversation, and we're talking about CRMs. How do you see technology playing a role into the new skills that sourcers are developing into this targeted, more personalized approach?
Yeah, I mean, I really think AI is going to be kind of that next wave. I know there's a tool called Hiring Solved that I've looked at in AI. I definitely recommend folks checking that out. It's not a CRM, but it's really extremely cutting edge. I talked with their CEO 2 weeks ago or so. They were doing a demo. So I think I think the next wave is going to be artificial intelligence, machine learning, and you touched on that, Chris, and really sourcers as technologists, at least at some of the larger organizations and even mid-size. And I think as that becomes less cost prohibitive and the cost makes sense, even smaller companies are going to be able to be more competitive. So in some ways, it's going to be able to level the playing field through technology, through leveraging the tool. But you still need to have somebody who understands the business, understands that C-suite and what they want to brand and what they're after, and then can make that make sense and align that with the technology. So artificial intelligence, machine learning is probably going to be the next wave in sourcing. I think sources are going to either evolve or be displaced if they don't stay current in some of those technologies.
Yeah, no, and I think, I mean, there's definitely things like AI that I think will help that, but it'll be really interesting too how those, different tools and machine learning also integrate with those CRMs, the recruitment marketing platforms that have kind of all the data that you own. And so, I think one of the things that we're really seeing, I know a trend that we're seeing, is that we're really seeing organizations own data in a number of different ways. It's about owning the contact and the relationships with your candidates within that CRM. It's about owning the performance data around how your email campaigns are performing, how all your sources are performing, not only in terms of just views, clicks, but in terms of hardline applicants as well as hires. And I know one of the things that organizations really have been pushing for, and I know on the sourcing side is just proving the value of their sourcing campaigns, and proving it to their talent acquisition leaders, leveraging that data with hiring managers to kind of prove all the quality candidates that they're providing, but also proving it to the business that talent acquisition has really been a strategic partner with the organization's growth when we look at that. So when we kind of just to summarize and kind of bring it all together here, when you think about kind of the sourcer of the future and all these things that we talked about of, having marketing skills, being able to better target message, being that domain expert that really understands the space, understands that candidate audience, being able to leverage technology better. What do you see as, those things that if I'm a sourcer and I'm trying to, become, the best sourcer I can, what does that sourcer of the future look like to you, Justen?
I'd say two things. One, they understand technology. They can get up to speed quickly on new tools. And I'd say two, the human aspect, understanding people and understanding, what's going to resonate. So it's really blending those two. The ability to humanize and personalize and set up captivating messaging so that recruitment marketing piece is going to be so critical in the future. But I also must say that the data analytics piece is huge because, you're only as good as your data. If you can look at, the number of applies and you're not getting any applies with some of the, job boards, and you can provide that to your executive team and ultimately save money or allocate funds in the right direction to get more hires or get more bang for your buck, then you're not only just hiring people, but you're saving your corporation money as well. And I think that's where sourcers need to look at big picture, and they need to be, lock in step with the business. So, in the end, I think technology and also the ability to really humanize and understand their business at a very deep level and be locked in step with their executive team on where their business is going, how they want to be branded. I think those are probably the two most important aspects. And obviously working closely with your recruitment marketing team, or if you're that person, then you're kind of holding two hats, understanding what the overall message is and what the mission of your company is. I think it's at a deep level, at a gut level, what do we want to convey and how do we want to convey that? And that may stem all the way up from your CEO and your C-suite. And you want to know straight from them, what kind of branding we want to put out there, and then be able to kind of take that as a baseline and then structure all this other technology, talent community, and everything else underneath of that umbrella. That's what I'm trying to do here, and that's what I have done.
Well, Justen, thank you. I mean, that was a great and really complete answer. It sounds like you yourself wear a lot of hats. So I think that it's really awesome to hear about the many cool projects you're working on. But so with our last 10 minutes here, I'd love to move into the Q&A section. So first of all, we've seen a lot of questions coming in during this webinar around just kind of like the basics here. Can you guys bring a little clarity? I don't know, Chris, if you can just lay out, just to provide a little overall big picture context here. I mean, what's the difference between like a campaign, the type of recruitment marketing campaign we're talking about, and just like a cold outreach or like an individual email? Can you just set the stage there a little?
Yeah, so I mean, I think when we think about kind of an overall talent acquisition strategy, we really need to think about it, holistically. So, I think, for most organizations, especially ones that have a very big kind of sourcing contingent, it's about, being able to find, that talent and then be able to send, targeted responses to them so that, you're ultimately attracting them and bringing them into the organization. And so when we think about campaigning, I think, from a sourcing perspective, that's probably leveraging your talent network and leveraging those individual talent pipelines, and potentially that could be sending a small list of, it could be, 15 different candidates within a specific candidate population. But when we think about kind of recruit marketing campaigning, we're also seeing, organizations, send to a much larger audience, tens of thousands that are a lot more targeted, but it's a little bit more general kind of marketing, branding campaigns than what you would be sending from a sourcing perspective.
Awesome. Yeah. And in talking about, targeting those messages, when you say leveraging your talent networks, you're talking about segmentation too, right? I mean, I think for the people on here who are just getting started with building out their talent networks, can you just provide a little context on how would you segment this database? Justen, I mean, do you want to take this one? How do you go about segmenting your database or your talent network?
Yeah, I think you want it to align with the forecasting for either your vertical or your enterprise-wide, solution. So you want to look at what are our needs now, what are our future state needs. If right now you need Java developers, but they need to have very specific skill sets, and it's in 2 different locations. Let's say it's San Francisco and DC, for example. You may do segmentation of folders and then maybe subfolders. So you may have a overall folder for Java folks, so you can always send a blanket email to all your Java folks and address both jobs, and then have subfolders and have them subfolder to Bay Area and DC. And then you can always do targeted messaging to the DC and San Francisco population. So, DC, I may say, off such and such metro. The Bay Area, I may say, right off the BART, blah, blah, so you can have like these very targeted kind of tickler messages unique to that geographic region or unique to that skill set. I would say segmenting it so it makes sense for your business. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. If you have, one geographic region and really 3 skill sets, that makes segmentation very easy. If you're like, companies that I've worked for where you have, hundreds of different jobs, it's understanding where is the highest volume, where is that need, what makes sense to build out those pipelines and then aggregate that data, segment it out within folders and subfolders for future messaging. But if you just have one vast talent community and they're not segmented out, it's going to be very hard to send anything other than, a vast, newsletter, which is great for branding. But if you want to do segmentation, add these targeted messages, you really got to get into the weeds and have those, different folders, and I'd say have notes on some of the candidates. If you talk to them, where they know where they've come from. Did they come from a women in cyber event, or did they come from a event at a job fair or something else? So where they came from, the source, and you can always add notes in there for future reference. But I think it's so critical so that your messaging makes sense for what you're recruiting for. If you're recruiting for LA, may be very different than if I'm recruiting for a job in the Midwest or a job on the East Coast, and then it even gets further, more detailed, depending upon that skill set, the level, things like that. So I think it's very important to aggregate that. I do it a lot by geography and skill set, so competencies. If you're a larger company, I think competencies is the easier way to do it. If you're smaller, it could be that it could be 3 or 4 core skill sets, or you could do it by levels. You could have new college grads like level 1, mid-level, mid-tier, career, professionals, and senior. So you could always label them like 1, 2, 3. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. I wish it was. It's based on the size of your organization and the needs. You want those folders to align with the business needs of your company, and that may come, from HR executives, your C-suite, and you just want it to align and make sense, because what you need now may be very different than what you need, 2 weeks from now or a month from now if you're if you're in government. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I think you're right that there are a lot of different ways you can go about slicing and dicing your talent networks or your database and segmenting there. And an interesting statistic from MailChimp, this kind of blows my mind, but it's not specified what kind of segmentation this is, but according to MailChimp, segmented campaigns perform better than non-segmented campaigns, and that makes a lot of sense. You see 14% higher open rate on segmented campaigns, and you can see up to 100% higher click rate actually on segmented campaigns. So you really gain a lot by targeting your messaging to a specific group, whatever firmographic information or geographic information you end up basing that on. So thank you. All right, I have another question here. And Chris, I think I'm gonna give this one to you at first. But in your experience, how do third-party agencies fit into sourcing and recruitment marketing strategy?
Yeah, so I think when we think about kind of third parties, there's a number of different third parties, right? There's your job boards, job channels, marketing channels. There's the agency that's more brand agency, and so that can help you really start to develop an employer brand and provide some media buying as well as some creative elements. But where we kind of see the difference there is that many organizations are kind of moving away from outsourcing kind of everything recruitment marketing to a number of those agencies, and kind of bringing it in-house so that they can own the data, they can own the contacts, and they can also evaluate the campaigns in a way that is centralized against all the things that they're doing as well. We also probably see when we think about third-party kind of recruiters and sourcing companies that ultimately provide contacts. And so, with that, I think it's a very similar thing of understanding and having technology or a process to ultimately be able to measure the effectiveness of those independently of the solution or the agencies that are providing that data or providing those campaigns. And Justen, I would love to get your thoughts on kind of your history of leveraging third parties in addition to your own channels and own work from a sourcing perspective.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, having a robust CRM so that you can take some of the ownership of your own recruitment marketing strategy, I think is a cornerstone right now. Partnership is important. Obviously, if you're a larger company, you may need that assistance for larger media buys and things of that nature. But that can inevitably end up being cost prohibitive. Whereas you can leverage a CRM and be able to do it in some cases much better, or at least have a blended approach where you're still partnering with that third party, but it may make more sense to have your recruitment marketing or sourcers or both, leveraging and doing very targeted messaging with the CRM, and they're going to know the business better because they work for you. That being said, I think third parties like job boards and you mentioned sourcing agencies, I think are still vital, especially for some of those specialized roles. But it's knowing which ones work and which ones don't. Allocating the cost appropriately, and you can really only do that, with a robust CRM. And then you're adding value to your management. You're adding a look into a vantage point into or visibility into where the cost makes sense, where are we getting the most bang for our buck, where aren't we? If we're posting to Indeed and we're getting all our hires from Indeed, but Glassdoor isn't even getting us 5 clicks a week, you want visibility into that. And in some cases the third party may not be able to run those analytics as well as you can just do that in-house. Obviously, if you have a CRM, if you don't, that can be obviously a little more difficult. And it would be a manual operation, which could be, time consuming. So, that hopefully that makes sense. I think that, in the future, sourcers are going to be providing, and recruitment marketing professionals will be providing that data so that costs are allocated appropriately. And ultimately, we're saving money for the company and getting the most bang for our buck in terms of what we're leveraging in some of our messaging with the third parties.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I want to say thank you so much to you, Justen, and to Chris. Thanks for speaking on our webinar today. I really loved hearing your perspectives on, next generation sourcing skills and technologies. It was awesome. And I have a ton more questions here that I really want to get to because they're excellent questions. Thank you to everyone who asked them. Unfortunately, we've hit the top of the hour, so what we're going to do is I will make sure that we get in touch with some of our blog authors, and hopefully we'll do a blog follow-up post on blog.smashfly.com as soon as we can after the webinar so that we can get to the rest of those questions, because a lot of really good ones there, and I know I would love to hear more of Justen and Chris's thoughts on them. So before we go, Justen, did you have a quick announcement you wanted to make around
yeah.
look for a sourcer?
Oh yeah. So CSRA, we are looking for a senior sourcer for our company. They can work 100% remote. Advanced Boolean search is a must. Strong technology experience, and also just strong recruitment experience. If you're interested, get in touch with me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk with you. We're based here in the DC
Awesome.
metro area, but again, you can be anywhere. So happy to talk to anybody if they're interested.
Awesome. Yeah, if you want to work more with Justen and learn from his awesome sourcing knowledge, there you go. And my last little announcement here real quick is just we're really excited about the Transform Recruitment Marketing Facebook group. If you have questions about recruitment marketing or running your own recruitment marketing campaigns, or even how marketing can be a bigger part of your sourcing practice, this is a great place to go. It's starting to get, it's just starting up, but there are a lot of great minds there. Discuss with your peers, recruitment marketing best practices, ask your questions. So feel free to check it out. So anyway, lastly, thank you so much everybody who attended today. We really enjoyed having you on the call. Keep an eye out on the blog for the follow-up blog post, and have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you, Justen, and thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, Ali.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Bye, everybody.
Have a good one. Bye, guys.